100 days. No confirmed sighting. No public suspect. No answer for a family still waiting. And yet, investigators keep going back to the same narrow window. 9:50 p.m., 1:47 a.m., 2:12 a.m., 2:28 a.m., then almost 10 hours of silence before the call for help. Somewhere inside that stretch of time, Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Tucson home, and 100 days later the question is no longer only where is Nancy. The deeper question is this: who knows what happened, and why have they stayed silent? Because after 100 days, this case does not feel empty. It feels unfinished. There is a camera. There is blood. There is a timeline. There is a masked person. There is a search area that seems almost impossible to fully clear. There are thousands of tips. There is a sheriff saying investigators are closer, and there is still no public name attached to the person who walked up to that door. Before we go deeper, like this video and subscribe to True Crime Greyson. This case needs careful attention, not wild accusations. Here, we follow the facts, protect the victim's dignity, and keep the focus on what still needs answered. The 100-day mark is not important because investigators suddenly start over. It is important because the public starts to feel the weight of time. In the first days, everything feels urgent. Search teams move. Neighbors check cameras. Reporters arrive. Family members plead. The public watches every update and expects the next one to be the breakthrough. But by 100 days, the rhythm changes. The search no longer feels like a sprint. It becomes a long, quiet grind. Tips still come in, but fewer of them feel fresh. The first wave of camera footage has already been reviewed. The easy interviews have already happened. The obvious search areas have already been walked, mapped, or discussed. And the family is left with the same unbearable question they had on day one. Where is she? That is why the 100-day mark hurts. It is not a legal deadline. It is not a forensic deadline. It is not the day a case becomes unsolvable. But emotionally, it changes the atmosphere. It forces everyone to admit that the case has entered a different phase. The early hope is still there, but it has to survive longer silence. The investigators may still be working, but the public sees fewer updates. The family may still believe an answer is coming, but every morning without Nancy makes that belief harder to hold. And then, just before the 100-day mark, Sheriff Chris Nanos said investigators were closer. He did not explain how. He did not give a suspect name. He did not reveal a new piece of evidence. He simply said they were closer. That short answer created a new question. Was that real confidence or careful public wording? Because in a case this painful, every word matters. When a sheriff says investigators are closer, people listen. They want to believe it means evidence is tightening. They want to believe it means someone is being watched. They want to believe it means a DN, a result, a vehicle lead, a witness, a camera clip, or a hidden timeline detail has moved the case forward. But without details, the public is left to wonder. Closer to what? Closer to finding Nancy? Closer to identifying the masked person? Closer to proving a motive? Closer to an arrest? Closer to confirming what investigators already suspect? That is the tension at the heart of this case. The public knows enough to feel the danger, but not enough to see the answer. And that is why investigators keep returning to the timeline. The timeline is the backbone of the entire case. It begins on the evening of January 31st. Nancy reportedly took an Uber to a family dinner at 5:32 p.m. She was later dropped off at her Tucson home around 9:48 p.m. Authorities have said the garage door opened and closed shortly afterward. That detail matters because it places Nancy back at the house before the critical overnight window. Then the case goes quiet for several hours. No public sighting. No confirmed public contact. No public explanation for anything unusual inside the home. Then, at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnected. That is the first hard break in the night. 1:40 to 7 a.m., a camera stops. A system goes dark. A home that should have been quiet becomes part of a criminal timeline. Then, at 2:12 a.m., camera software detected a person or possible movement near the home. At the time, officials said video was not available through the normal system because there was no active subscription. Digital teams continued working to recover what they could from back-end data. Then came the point that still chills people following this case. 2:28 a.m. Nancy's pacemaker app disconnected from her phone. That timestamp matters because it suggests another break in the ordinary pattern of her life. It does not tell the public exactly what happened. It does not tell the public where she went. But it marks another point where the normal system around Nancy stopped giving answers. Then comes the longest silence. From 2:28 a.m. until late morning, relatives checked the home around 11:56 a.m. The 911 call came at 12:03 p.m. That means investigators had to think about a window much wider than the moments at the door. The first key window is between 1:40 to 7 a.m. and 2:28 a.m. The second is between 2:20 to 8 a.m. and the welfare check. And the third reaches back to the moment Nancy was dropped off. That is why detectives keep returning to the same times. 9:40 to 8 p.m., 9:50 p.m., 1:47 a.m., 2:12 a.m., 2:28 a.m., 11:56 a.m., 12:03 p.m. Those are not random numbers. They are the anchors of a case that still has too much darkness between them. A retired homicide detective in the public discussion made a simple point. The timeline is where investigators start because it is the part they know best. When a new lead comes in, they compare it to the timeline. When a vehicle is reported, they compare it to the timeline. When someone remembers a sound, a light, a person, or a strange movement, they compare it to the timeline. That is how a case slowly sharpens. A tip by itself may mean nothing. A tip that fits the timeline may mean everything. And in Nancy's case, the timeline has one question that will not go away. What happened after 2:28 a.m.? That is the missing stretch that haunts this case. Because once the pacemaker app disconnected, the public timeline loses its strongest digital marker. From that point, until relatives arrived late in the morning, anything is possible in distance. A vehicle leaving Tucson in that window could cover miles. A person trying to hide evidence could move through neighborhoods, washes, desert roads, or highways. Someone with even a small head start could put a large area between Nancy's home and the next known location. That is why the search is so hard. People often imagine a missing person search as a circle around a house. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, search the area. And eventually the answer appears. But the moment a vehicle becomes possible, the circle breaks. The search area becomes roads, turns, back routes, desert channels, highway access, unseen driveways, dry washes, gated land, places where a person could stop for seconds or vanish for hours. That is why the missing hours matter. The question is not only where did Nancy go, it is how fast did someone move her, and in what direction. The blood evidence brings the case back to the front door. Authorities have reported that blood found outside the home was identified as Nancy. That fact is one of the strongest public indicators that something happened at or near the front entrance. It also supports why investigators do not treat this as a normal, voluntary disappearance. An elderly woman with limited mobility does not leave behind blood at her own entrance, then simply vanish, without taking the rest of her life with her. The blood creates a physical anchor. It says something happened there, but it does not explain everything. That is what makes it so powerful and so frustrating. Experts who reviewed the public images have discussed the blood pattern carefully. One retired detective described it as low-velocity blood evidence, meaning it appeared to fall in one area rather than spray across a wider path. Another noted that the lack of a long, visible trail raises questions about what happened after that moment. That matters, because if Nancy was bleeding at the front entrance, people naturally expect a trail, drops leading away, a direction, a path, a line. But public discussion has not shown a clear blood trail away from the porch. That absence creates another question. Was the source of the bleeding covered? Was Nancy repositioned? Was she carried? Was she moved in a way that stopped additional drops from reaching the ground? Was the person responsible trying to control the evidence? These are questions, not conclusions. The public does not have the full forensic file. Experts working from public images do not have every scene detail. But the blood at the door remains one of the most important clues, because it marks the place where the case becomes physical. Before the blood, the timeline feels like a missing person case. After the blood, it becomes harder to believe Nancy left on her own. That is why the front door matters. It is where home meets danger. It is where the camera was. It is where the masked person appeared. It is where blood was found. It is where the known evidence begins to converge. The camera question is just as important. The public has seen images of the masked person at the door. Those images became the face of the case, even though there is no visible face. A covered head, gloves, dark clothing, a figure at the entrance, a person close enough to Nancy's door to become the clearest public clue, but hidden enough to remain unknown. The footage does not show the full crime. It does not show Nancy being taken. It does not show where the person went after the camera interaction. It does not show a vehicle. It does not show motive. But it shows presence. And presence matters. A person was there, at the right place, in the critical window, interacting with the camera. That is why investigators released the images. They needed the public to look at build, clothing, movement, posture, and anything else that might help identify the person. Some analysts have questioned whether more video exists, but has not been released. That is possible, but not publicly confirmed. In active investigations, law enforcement often holds back footage for many reasons. They may want to protect details only the suspect would know. They may want to avoid exposing a victim's final moments. They may want to preserve evidence for later interviews. They may want to prevent false confessions. They may want to keep leverage. So if there is more video, the public may not see it. And if there is not, the recovered images still matter. Either way, the camera remains one of the most important pieces in the case. A retired local investigator suggested that even if the public only sees one clip, investigators may have more technical data or recovered fragments than they have released. That remains opinion. But it fits how digital investigations work. The public sees the outside layer. The investigators see timestamps, metadata, recovery attempts, device history, software detections, and back-end records. That difference creates the same question again. What do investigators know that the public does not? By day 100, that question has become one of the biggest forces in the case. The public sees no arrest, but investigators may see a DNA path. The public sees no new video, but investigators may have unreleased footage or recovered fragments. The public sees no named suspect, but investigators may have a narrowing pool. The public sees silence, but silence does not always mean no movement. Sometimes silence means a case is weak. Sometimes it means investigators are protecting something. Sometimes it means they are waiting for a lab. Sometimes it means they are testing a theory before saying a word. That uncertainty is why this case refuses to fade. The search terrain adds another layer of difficulty. Tucson is not a flat neighborhood grid where every movement is obvious. The area around Nancy's home includes washes, dry channels, brush, rocky ground, and spaces that can hide a person, an object, or a route. A retired Pima County lieutenant walked through one of the washes near the area and described how difficult the terrain can be. Dense brush, dry beds, open sections wide enough for vehicles, narrower sections that vanish between roads, places close to homes, but hidden from direct view. That kind of terrain changes a search. From above, a wash may look simple. From the ground, it becomes a maze of shadows, brush, rocks, fallen branches, animal paths, and places where evidence can sit within feet of searchers and still be missed. A person could throw an object under brush and walk away. A vehicle could enter a low area and disappear from a road for a short distance. An item could be buried under debris. Heat, animals, weather, dust, and time could change everything. That is why 100 days matters in the terrain. The longer a search goes, the more the environment works against investigators. Temperatures rise, scent fades, tracks disappear, wind moves debris, stormwater can shift small evidence, animals disturb areas, human memory fades. And what was visible in the first day may not look the same after weeks or months. That does not mean the search is hopeless. It means every search decision becomes a resource decision. Where do you send people? Where do you send dogs? Which wash matters? Which road matters? Which tip is strong enough to justify a ground team? How far out do you go? How do you search miles of terrain when the missing person may have been moved by vehicle? A retired investigator in the discussion explained the problem clearly. Once you move beyond the immediate area, the search becomes less certain. A mile or two from the house may feel close, but a vehicle changes scale. In hours, a vehicle can reach another city, another county, another state, even another country. That is the challenge. If Nancy left the home on foot, nearby terrain becomes the priority. If someone moved her by vehicle, the search area expands dramatically. Investigators have to balance both possibilities. The washes still matter because they are close, hidden, and difficult. But the larger travel window means the answer may be much farther away. That is why a single location lead would matter so much. A vehicle sighting, a camera clip, a witness, a discarded item, a scent hit, a phone signal, a piece of physical evidence. Any one of those could shrink the search area. Without that, the case remains too wide. The tip flood is another hidden burden. Public discussions have mentioned tens of thousands of tips. Even if the exact number changes over time, the problem is the same. High-profile cases generate massive volumes of information. Some tips are serious, some are mistaken, some are repeats, some are emotional guesses. Some come from people who truly want to help, but saw something unrelated. Some come from people chasing theories online. Some may be harmful, some may be the key. Investigators cannot ignore tips, but they also cannot treat every tip as equal. A retired homicide detective explained how a large tip pool gets sorted. The strongest tips go first. The possible tips sit in the middle. The weak tips fall lower, but even a weak-looking tip can matter later if another piece of evidence connects to it. That is the grind of a major case. A case may look quiet on television, while investigators spend weeks sorting, ranking, calling, checking, eliminating, comparing, and returning to tips that did not seem important at first. The public wants a breakthrough. Investigators often get paperwork. They get partial memories. They get vague descriptions. They get people saying they saw someone who looked suspicious. They get vehicle colors without plates. They get camera clips outside the exact window. They get names without evidence. They get rumors. They get repeated theories. And buried somewhere in that mountain may be one detail that matters. That is why the lack of public updates does not automatically mean nothing is happening. It may mean investigators are drowning in work the public will never see. But it also raises another question. How long does it take to find the one true lead if it is buried under thousands of weak ones? That is the burden of public attention. It helps because more eyes see the case. It hurts because more noise enters the case. The challenge is finding the signal inside the noise. The sheriff's messaging has become its own issue. At the 100-day mark, many people expected a public update, not necessarily a major evidence reveal, not a suspect name, not a full timeline, but a message, a reassurance, a clear statement that investigators still care, still work, still ask for tips, still believe the case can be solved. Instead, the public saw short answers and limited detail. Sheriff Nanos said investigators were closer, but did not explain. Some retired law enforcement voices criticized the lack of stronger public communication. They argued that even when investigators cannot release details, leadership can still speak to the public with confidence, empathy, and clarity. That criticism does not mean the investigation itself is not moving. Poor messaging is not the same as no work. But messaging matters. In a case this visible, the family needs to know the case remains alive. The public needs to know what to do with information. Potential witnesses need reminders. People who saw something strange months ago need a reason to think again. And the person responsible, if still free, needs to know pressure has not vanished. A leader does not have to give away evidence to do that. A careful statement can say the case remains active. It can say every tip is being reviewed. It can say investigators are using local, state, and federal resources. It can ask neighbors to preserve footage. It can remind people of the reward. It can acknowledge the family's pain. It can mark the 100-day milestone with respect. That kind of message matters, because silence in a case like this does not stay empty. The public fills it. They fill it with theories. They fill it with suspicion. They fill it with frustration. They fill it with anger. They fill it with rumor. And once rumor fills the space, it becomes harder to bring people back to the facts. That is why responsible coverage matters. This case has already been through enough speculation. There are unverified claims, online theories, suspect rumors, and accusations that law enforcement has not confirmed. This episode should stay grounded. No family accusation. No confirmed suspect claim without official support. No statement that Nancy is confirmed dead. No statement that investigators have no leads. No statement that any one search area definitely holds the answer. No statement that any one vehicle is connected, unless confirmed. The facts are strong enough. Nancy is missing. Authorities believe she was taken against her will. A masked person appeared at her door. Her camera disconnected. Her pacemaker app disconnected. Her blood was found outside the home. No public suspect has been named. The case has reached 100 days. The sheriff says investigators are closer. The search terrain is difficult. The family still wants answers. That is enough to carry the story. The blood evidence deserves one more look, because it sits at the emotional center of the case. A retired FBI profiler recently discussed the blood outside the home and suggested that Nancy may have been alive at the threshold. That is expert interpretation based on public evidence. It should not be stated as official final proof unless authorities confirm it. But the idea is important because it changes how people understand the front door. The porch may not be only the place where a person approached. It may be the place where Nancy's final confirmed physical struggle, injury, or movement became visible. The lack of a public blood trail beyond that area deepens the question. How did the person responsible move her? Did they cover the source of the blood? Did they carry her? Did they reposition her? Did they move fast? Did they have help? Did they know where to go? Again, these are questions the public does not know. But the front door remains the point where the case becomes real. Not theory, not rumor. A place, a camera, blood, a missing woman, a person in dark clothing, a device that went silent. That is why the timeline and the porch should keep pulling the story back to earth. Every time the case drifts into broad theories, the evidence pulls it back. 1:47 a.m., 2:12 a.m., 2:28 a.m., blood outside, camera footage, no confirmed public suspect. Those are the anchors. The next major question is what investigators may still be waiting for. One possibility is DNA. Public reporting has discussed DNA testing, mixed DNA, glove-related testing, and the possibility that advanced genealogy may help. DNA does not always solve a case quickly, but it can remain powerful long after public attention fades. A DNA profile with no immediate match is not useless. It may sit in a database. It may be compared again later. It may become useful if someone is arrested in another case and their DNA is entered. It may be used in genetic genealogy if the legal and technical path allows it. It may help exclude people. It may help connect evidence to a scene. It may become the key after months of silence. That is why investigators do not give up on science. Science can move slowly, but slow does not mean dead. Another possibility is a witness. Someone may have seen something and dismissed it. A car on a road, a person walking near a wash, a strange movement near a property, a vehicle parked where it should not have been, a person returning home late, a change in someone's behavior after the footage was released, a person suddenly leaving town, a conversation that felt wrong, a discarded object, a detail that seemed too small to call in. That kind of witness can break a case. The problem is that people often silence themselves. They think it is nothing. They think investigators already know. They do not want to get involved. They fear being wrong. They fear accusing someone unfairly. They wait until the memory fades. But in a case like Nancy's, even a small memory may matter. Not because it solves the case alone, because it may connect to something investigators already have. A witness may not know they hold the missing piece. They may only hold a corner. Investigators may already have the other side. Another possibility is location. If Nancy is found, investigators may gain a new crime scene. That is painful to say, but it is true. A recovery location can show direction of travel. It can show method. It can show whether a vehicle was used. It can preserve trace evidence. It can connect to a suspect's known route, phone movement, or activity. It can confirm or destroy theories. It can give the family some measure of answer, even if the answer is devastating. Some retired investigators believe the case may one day move through recovery rather than rescue. Others urge people not to give up hope. The responsible way to say it is this: Nancy has not been found, and no public source has confirmed her fate. That means hope and fear still exist together. The family lives inside both. Another possibility is a vehicle lead. The timeline allows for movement. The terrain allows for hidden routes. A vehicle would explain distance. A vehicle may have been seen. A vehicle may have been captured. A vehicle may have passed a camera. A vehicle may have left a trace. But until investigators confirm a connection, any vehicle remains a question. That is why public calls for footage matter. Footage does not always look important at first. A vehicle passes at night. Nothing else happens. No one notices. Weeks later, that same vehicle may become part of a timeline. But if the footage has overwritten, the chance is gone. That is one of the most frustrating parts of the case. Digital evidence feels permanent, but often it is not. Doorbell clips delete. Security systems overwrite. Phones update. Cloud storage expired. A camera that could have caught the answer may erase it before anyone asks. That is why the first days mattered so much. That is why 100 days feels heavy. Time does not only pass, time removes options. Still, investigators are not without tools. They have the timeline. They have the camera recovery. They have physical evidence. They have tips. They have public awareness. They have rewards. They have forensic testing. They have the possibility of DNA movement over time. They have experts reviewing the case. They have digital evidence paths. They have search areas still being discussed. They have the pressure of a high-profile case that refuses to disappear. That pressure matters. It keeps the case alive. It reminds witnesses. It may unsettle the person responsible. It may push someone close to the truth to speak. But pressure has to be aimed carefully. It should not become harassment. It should not become online accusation. It should not become a game of naming people without evidence. That kind of pressure hurts cases. The useful pressure is public memory. Keep Nancy's name visible. Keep the timeline clear. Keep the images of the masked person in circulation. Keep the tip lines active. Keep the reward known. Keep asking for real information, not rumor, not guesses, real information. At this point, like this video if you want Nancy's case to stay visible, and subscribe to True Crime Greyson for careful, fact-based updates. One useful tip can change everything, but only if the case stays in front of people who may know something. The hardest part of the 100-day mark is the family's uncertainty. People often talk about closure, but investigators and victim families know that word can feel wrong. A case can be solved and still leave pain. A body can be found and still leave trauma. An arrest can happen and still leave questions. But not knowing is its own kind of suffering. Not knowing where Nancy is. Not knowing what happened after the camera disconnected. Not knowing whether she saw the person. Not knowing whether she fought. Not knowing whether she left the home conscious. Not knowing whether she was taken far away. Not knowing whether the person responsible was a stranger, a local person, or someone with specific knowledge. Not knowing if one missed camera, one missed search, or one missed conversation could have changed everything. That is what makes this case so hard. It is not only unresolved, it is unresolved with fragments. Enough fragments to build fear, not enough fragments to build an answer. That is the kind of case that stays with people. The masked person is not a complete unknown, but not known enough. The timeline is not empty, but has gaps. The blood tells us something happened, but not exactly how. The terrain gives possible hiding places, but no confirmed location. The tips may hold the answer, but the answer has not been identified publicly. The sheriff says they are closer, but the public does not know why. Every detail gives something and withholds something. That is the structure of the mystery. And at 100 days, the strongest question becomes simple. Who knows the truth? Someone may know the masked person's identity. Someone may know why that person was near Nancy's door. Someone may know if the person acted alone. Someone may know whether a vehicle was used. Someone may know where Nancy was taken. Someone may know why the case is not broken publicly. Someone may know what investigators are missing. Or someone may not realize what they know matters. Maybe they saw a vehicle but did not connect it. Maybe they heard something in the early morning and forgot until the case became bigger. Maybe they noticed someone close to them behaving differently after the FBI images were released. Maybe they saw clothing thrown away. Maybe they heard a comment that sounded strange. Maybe they remember a person being out during the window. Maybe they know someone who suddenly became anxious, quiet, angry, or distant. Maybe they have a camera clip from the right time, but never checked it carefully. Maybe they live outside the first search radius and assumed police would contact them if their footage mattered. Maybe they still have the missing piece. This is why tips still matter after 100 days. A case does not always break when evidence is first collected. Sometimes it breaks when someone finally understands the value of what they saw. That is the message investigators need the public to hear. Do not assume your detail is too small. Do not assume investigators already know. Do not assume someone else called. Do not post accusations online. Send the information to the people working the case. The terrain around Tucson makes that even more important. A person familiar with the area may know a wash, a turnout, a hidden path, a place where a car could sit unseen, a route that avoids bigger roads. Someone who knows those details may not think like an investigator. They may think like a local. That kind of local knowledge can matter. An outsider sees empty desert. A local sees a cut-through, a wash, a place teens used to park, a dirt path, a back way to a road, a place where evidence could be hidden, a place that looks close on a map but feels invisible from the street. That is why the search terrain is not just background. It is part of the case. If the masked person knew the area, the terrain may have helped him. If he did not, he may have made a mistake in choosing a route. Either way, geography matters. And every person who knows that geography may hold value. Still, the core of the investigation remains the same. The timeline, the physical evidence, the camera, the tips, the forensic work, the search, the public appeal. The 100-day mark does not erase any of that. It only makes the need sharper. Investigators may still be closer than the public knows, or they may still be waiting for one break. Both things can be true in different ways. A case can have active leads and still no arrest. A case can have strong evidence and still no name. A case can have a working theory and still need proof. A case can be moving forward quietly while the public feels stuck. That is why patience matters, but patience is hard. Patience does not comfort a family waiting for a mother. Patience does not quiet the public. Patience does not answer what happened. But in complex investigations, patience is often part of the work. Labs take time. Genealogy takes time. Interviews take time. Tip sorting takes time. Searches take time. Court-ready evidence takes time. The danger is mistaking silence for surrender. The other danger is mistaking noise for truth. This case has both. Silence from the official side, noise from the public side. The truth will not come from either one alone. It will come from evidence that holds. That is why every claim should be measured. Does it match the timeline? Does it come from a credible source? Did law enforcement confirm it? Is it an expert opinion or a forensic fact? Does it identify a person or only raise a possibility? Does it help find Nancy or only feed attention? That is the filter this case needs. 100 days in, the case deserves more care, not less. The public has to resist the urge to turn uncertainty into certainty. There is no public suspect. That matters. Nancy has not been located. That matters. The family continues to ask for help. That matters. The sheriff says investigators are closer. That matters. The terrain remains hard. That matters. The timeline still holds unanswered hours. That matters most. Because somewhere between Nancy arriving home and the call to 911, the truth moved. It moved through a doorway. It moved past a camera. It moved beyond a phone connection. It moved into silence. And 100 days later, that silence still has not broken. The final question is not whether investigators care. The final question is not whether the public still cares. The final question is what piece is missing. Is it a name, a location, a vehicle, a DNA hit, a camera clip, a witness, a confession, a buried tip, a person who is afraid to speak? The answer may be one of those. It may be several. But the case will not move on emotion alone. It needs the missing piece, and someone may have it. The person who knows may not be the person responsible. They may be a neighbor, a driver, a friend, a relative of the offender, a coworker, a person who saw something strange and dismissed it, a person who has watched the case for months and stayed quiet because they were unsure. 100 days is long enough for fear to grow. It is also long enough for conscience to grow. If someone knows, the question is whether they will speak before the evidence reaches them first, because investigations do not stop just because the public gets tired. Evidence remains, files remain, DNA remains, footage remains, tips remain, and mistakes remain. If the person responsible made one mistake, that mistake may still be waiting in the case file. A movement on camera, a partial DNA profile, a vehicle in the wrong place, a witness who remembers late, a phone that connected once, a route that made sense only to someone local, a piece of evidence overlooked by the person who left it. That is why the case remains alive. Not because the public knows everything, because the public does not, and because investigators rarely show every card before they are ready to play it. The 100-day mark does not close the case. It sharpens the question. Where is Nancy Guthrie? Who was at her door? Who knows the truth? And what will finally break the silence? If you have followed this case from the beginning, do not let the lack of answers make you look away. Cases break when people keep paying attention. They break when a tip comes in. They break when one person decides not to stay silent. They break when evidence gets one more look. They break when science catches up. They break when time works against the person who thought it would protect them. Nancy's case still has movement. The sheriff says investigators are closer. Experts say the timeline remains central. The terrain still needs careful attention. The public still remembers the masked person. The reward still stands. The family still asks for help. And somewhere inside the evidence, the answer still exists. That answer may be painful. It may be complicated. It may not match the first theory people believed. It may come from science. It may come from a witness. It may come from a search. It may come from someone finally picking up the phone. But it exists. Truth does not vanish because 100 days pass. It only becomes harder to reach. And that is why this case still matters. Not because it has become famous. Not because it has been discussed on television. Not because of headlines. Because an elderly woman disappeared from her own home, and someone has not been held accountable. Because a family still lives with the empty space. Because a camera saw someone, but not enough. Because blood marked the porch, but not the destination. Because the terrain may hide more than anyone wants to admit. Because the timeline still has hours that belong to the person responsible. And because 100 days later, the silence itself feels like evidence of something still buried. If you believe cases like this should stay visible, like this video, share it and subscribe to True Crime Greyson. Keep Nancy's name alive. Keep the verified timeline clear. And if you know anything, contact the proper authorities. 100 days is a long time, but it is not the end. Not while the person at the door remains unidentified. Not while investigators say they are closer. Not while evidence is still being reviewed. Not while tips are still possible. Not while the family still waits. The case began with a quiet night in Tucson. It moved through a camera disconnect, a masked figure, a pacemaker app going silent, a late morning welfare check, a 911 call, blood at the home, searches through difficult terrain, thousands of possible leads, public frustration, expert debate, a sheriff's guarded words, and a question that still has no public answer. Where is Nancy Guthrie? The person who knows may think time has helped them. They may think the trail is gone. They may think the public has moved on. They may think 100 days makes the case weaker. But sometimes time does the opposite. It gives investigators space to compare. It gives labs time to test. It gives witnesses time to reconsider. It gives pressure time to build. It gives mistakes time to surface. And it gives the truth one more way to come out. So 100 days after Nancy vanished, the case stands in a painful place, not solved, not forgotten, not quiet enough to die, not clear enough to close. It remains suspended between the known and the unknown. The known is the timeline. The unknown is what happened inside it. The known is the blood at the door. The unknown is where she went after. The known is the masked person. The unknown is his name. The known is the family's call for answers. The unknown is who will finally give them. And until that unknown becomes known, the question remains, not only where is Nancy Guthrie, but who has been living with the truth for 100 days.